Well, I'd like to start by talking about the presidential debates. No, not those. Nope. I want to start with the first presidential debate, 1960, between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon. That was the first televised debate in the United States, and fortunately for all of us, Lenny Bruce was observing it, and he noticed that Nixon's supporters, as they were watching the debates, were absolutely sure and certain that Nixon was clobbering this young upstart, Jack Kennedy. But the Kennedy supporters were just as certain that Kennedy was absolutely killing Nixon, that sweating, creepy-looking guy. He said supporters of each man, he said, were so sure and certain that their guy had won. He said, Lenny Bruce said, I realized that each group loved their candidate so much that a guy would have to be this blatant. He would have to look into the camera and say, I'm a thief, I'm a crook. Do you hear me? I'm the worst choice you could make for president. And even then his followers would say, there's an honest man for you. Takes a big guy to admit that. Just the kind of guy we need for president. So Jim has given us the compelling evidence that we're not the rational animal we like to think we are, and Maria has given us important evidence about how we live our lives in the stories that we tell. The great communication scientist George Gerbner once said, human beings are the only species that tells stories and lives by the stories we tell. And I think that's what we've been hearing so far this morning. So skeptics, therefore, are really puzzled when we calmly provide evidence that a popular belief is wrong, or that some group is still doing something, some practice that's long past its sell-by date. And we are always amazed when the recipients of our calm, reasoned information don't say, why, thank you. I had no idea. Instead, we are puzzled that they wish to continue holding mistaken beliefs, keep doing things that are way out of date, instead of moving on to better ideas and better practices. Isn't it good to know that you didn't cause your child's autism by being a refrigerator mother in Bruno Bettelheim's day, or by vaccinating your children today? A psychotherapist friend of mine put it this way about a couple he saw. It's like this, the husband said. If it's not my fault, it's her fault. And if it's not her fault, it's still not my fault. So it is not surprising that people won't admit error or fault when to do so risks fines or imprisonment or impeachment or divorce or public condemnation. That's not news. The kind of self-justification I want to talk to you about is not the same thing as lying to other people to get off the hook. It's about the way our minds work to blind ourselves to the very realization that we have been wrong, foolish, prejudiced, or cruel. As skeptics, we are faced with what psychologists call the motivated rejection of science. Take global warming. Now, this is an interesting one. We talk a lot about climate change deniers, and we assume they must be less educated or less informed than wise scientists and skeptics. But it's not so simple. A recent article in Psychological Science found that attitudes about global warming are unrelated to levels of scientific literacy, numeracy, or education. They are associated with political partisanship. Among liberals, higher levels of scientific literacy and education are associated with increased acceptance of climate change, the importance of vaccination, and trust in science. But among conservatives, higher levels of scientific literacy and education are associated with reduced acceptance of science and belief in global warming. That's what motivated cognition means. We are emotionally motivated to reject findings that threaten our core beliefs, the beliefs that are most central to us, the stories we tell about our lives, our worldview. At present, the researchers found, The public rejection of scientific findings is more prevalent on the political right than on the left, but, they add, the cognitive mechanisms driving the rejection of science are found regardless of political orientation, meaning it depends on what the scientific finding is. Whether your worldview comes from the left or the right, you will be tempted to sacrifice skepticism even when your side is promoting some cockamamie belief without evidence. Okay, here's a cover from Ms. Magazine from many years ago, which has, I hope you can see the highlighted part on satanic ritual abuse with the logo, "Believe it, believe it." In those days we were told it was important to believe the claims that women were making, that there were ritual abuse cults that were killing and eating babies, kidnapping and torturing women, and if you didn't believe it, you were siding with the Satanists and the sexists. Decades ago, the great social psychologist Gordon Allport, in his brilliant book, The Nature of Prejudice, offered this exchange to illustrate the weaselly way a person with a prejudice or other entrenched belief argues with you. Well, the trouble with Jews is that they only take care of their own group. So you say, no, the record of the community chest shows that actually they give more generously than do non-Jews. Well, that shows they're always trying to buy favor and intrude into Christian affairs. They think of nothing but money. That's why there's so many Jewish bankers. Well, actually, a recent study shows that the percentage of Jews in the banking business is negligible. Look at Wells Fargo most recently, for example. Far smaller than the percentage of non-Jews. Well, that's just it. They don't go in for respectable business. They're only in the movie business, or they run nightclubs. Notice that people like Mr. X, and by the way, that's all of us on occasion, don't actually argue or respond to the point. They slide off your evidence and raise an irrelevant digression rather than face, let alone change, their fundamental belief. The key motivational mechanism that underlies the reluctance to change our minds, to admit mistakes, to be unwilling to accept scientific findings that we don't like, is cognitive dissonance. It's had many different names over the years, but changing its name, as we know from Jim, is no improvement on the phenomenon. Many years ago, 60 years ago, Leon Festinger developed this theory and showed that the key thing about it, it's simply the discomfort we feel when two ideas contradict each other or when our beliefs are contradicted by our own actions. Like hunger, it's uncomfortable and we are motivated to reduce it. Cognitive dissonance is everywhere these days. Some of you who are watching the latest Westworld may have known that the latest episode is called Dissonance Theory. And that's basically what it looks like. People who smoke will be in a state of dissonance because you know that smoking is bad for you, but you're a heavy smoker. So to reduce dissonance, smokers either have to quit or they have to justify smoking. Dissonance theory comprises three cognitive biases in particular. One is the bias that we're unbiased. This is my very favorite bias. This is the bias that we hold, we are clear in our perceptions, we are reasonable in our beliefs, because after all, if the belief were unreasonable, I wouldn't hold it, would I? Therefore, I know what I'm doing, I'm unbiased, and so all I have to do is get you to sit down and talk to me so that I can explain to you why you are wrong and I am right. And if you don't agree with me, it's because you are biased. The second bias is the better than average bias. I love this one. We might call this the American bias. We are better, kinder, smarter, more moral, and nicer than average. Most Americans think they are better than average in all of these ways, and 88% of Americans think they are better drivers than average. The rest of them live in Los Angeles, where I live. And of course, as I'm sure you know this one, the most fundamental bias in the way the mind works is the confirmation bias, which ensures that we notice and remember information that confirms what we believe and allows us to ignore and discount and minimize evidence that disconfirms what we believe. We might even call this the consonance bias because it keeps our beliefs in harmony by eliminating dissonant information before we're even aware of it. Dissonance is painful enough if you say, realize you've bought a lemon of a car and you paid too much for it. But it's most painful when an important element of the self-concept is threatened, when that central worldview is questioned. We have two ways of reducing the dissonance. We can accept the evidence and change the self-concept. Yes, I guess I was more foolish, stupid, irritating, and unkind than I usually am. Or we deny the evidence and preserve the self-concept. That study was fatally flawed. What a stupid study. Guess what the most popular choice is? And let me tell you, the dissonance reduction starts really, really early. A woman wrote to me that she had taken her 2.5-year-old little girl to the park and gave her a bundle of stickers to play with. And there was another little girl there, so the mother said, honey, wouldn't you like to share your stickers with that other little girl? She said, my daughter thought about it for a moment, was inclined to do so, and then she turned to me and said, that little girl doesn't like stickers, Mommy. Cognitive dissonance at 2.5. This way she gets to continue to see herself as a good little girl and keep her stickers. Cognitive dissonance links that adorable little girl with adults whose beliefs aren't nearly as cute, but are just as self-serving. Consider this conspiracy theorists who vehemently deny the horrifying evidence that Adam Lanza killed 20 little children at Sandy Hook. How can they deny this? They maintain it was all a conspiracy of the gun control lobby. They maintain that view even when confronted by the parents of the children who were slaughtered there. If we just look at this belief from a distance, it seems kind of crazy to us, but as my co-author Elliot Aronson says, many perfectly sane people hold lots of crazy ideas. We are seeing the end result of a process of dissonance reduction that looks strange to us, but is not once you see the process. If we start from where the disbelievers are, holding core beliefs in the importance of owning guns, that guns are safe, that gun control people want to take their guns away, then the information that guns were used for a rampage that left 20 little children dead is powerfully dissonant. By denying the evidence that this event occurred, they get to retain their gun beliefs and their self-esteem that they were right in holding those beliefs all along. Indeed, as dissonance theory would predict, the belief would become even stronger when it is confronted with what appears to be damning information. Look, they say, at the effort those bastards put into creating the fiction of Sandy Hook. They must really want to take our guns away. So the greatest danger of dissonance reduction occurs not when we hold an idea that's discrepant with something else, but when we make a decision that sets us on a course of action. The metaphor that Elliot Aronson and I use in our book is the metaphor of the pyramid. I love this. I hardly go anywhere without my pyramid nowadays. This was actually based on a real study of attitudes toward cheating among students done many, many years ago, but the metaphor holds for many decisions. Let's imagine two students are at the top of a pyramid in their attitudes toward cheating. They know it's not a good thing to do, but they don't think it's the worst crime in the world either. They're just a millimeter apart in their views. Right? Now they're taking a final exam. This grade on this final is going to determine their grade in the course. The grade in the course is going to determine whether they go to graduate school. Whether they go to graduate school is to determine whether they get married and have children and live a full life and have cats, okay? This exam is really, really important. And they freeze on a crucial question, an essay question no less, what to do. Suddenly, the student sitting next to them, the one with the beautiful handwriting, there's always one in every class, makes her answers available. What do you do? Do you cheat or do you not cheat? Spontaneously and without thinking about it, one decides to cheat for the sake of the grade, and the other decides not to cheat to preserve integrity. Now notice, the second they take that action or not action, they must change their attitudes toward cheating to conform with the decision they made. The one who cheated will now think cheating is not such a bad thing after all. Oh, please, I needed this for my future career. Everybody cheats. The one who resisted cheating will now think cheating is a far more serious problem than previously considered, and it's, not a victimless crime. We all suffer, and so forth. Over time, the two of them will have, in effect, slid to the bottom of this pyramid and are now very far apart in their attitudes about cheating, where one thinks it's no big deal and the other thinks cheaters should be expelled. Now, by the way, notice how hard it will be to go back up the pyramid once you've cheated and say, gee, that was the wrong thing to do. No, you've just spent a lot of mental time justifying why cheating was okay, which in turn makes it easier for you to cheat again. Why don't I just buy the services of a professional cheater to take the whole course for me? I really, really need the credits, so what if I don't learn what the class offers? I can learn neurosurgery in the Navy. You know what, George, how am I doing on time here? It's telling me I have 15 minutes. I do? Okay. So as we go through life, we will find ourselves on the top of many pyramids of choice as we make professional decisions and moral choices. Accept the evidence that a decision you made is wrong. Decide whether a sensational rape or murder case in the media is true. We're emotionally primed to respond, right, to those. Blow the whistle or decide not to rock the boat. Now, here's the key thing because of dissonance theory. As soon as we make a decision, even if it's just an impulsive, spontaneous one, we will stop noticing or looking for disconfirming evidence. We will now see only the evidence that we were right about the decision we made or the belief we now hold. And pretty soon we will find ourselves on the path to that bottom where certainty lies. We might have started off with some ambiguity, but now by the time we have justified ourselves and rolled along over time, we are pretty sure that what we did was right. We won't even look for evidence that we might be wrong. This process blurs the distinction that people like to draw between us good guys and those bad guys, or as we see occasionally in the skeptic world, us really smart, reasonable guys and those ignorant, crazy guys. It's precisely because we see ourselves as good skeptics that we are most at risk of justifying beliefs that perhaps we should stop justifying. The more we see ourselves as good skeptics, it's going to be harder to accept the evidence that we were perhaps not as skeptical as we should have been in believing it. Because often when we start at the top of that pyramid, we're faced not with a clear decision, but something ambiguous. And as we go along, we become more certain. How do you corrupt an innocent person? How does a company or a country get enmeshed in illegal or unethical decisions and courses of action? You just need to get them to take one small step off the pyramid, and self-justification will do most of the work for you. Dissonance reduction has its benefits. It lets us sleep at night. And besides, it's good to hold an informed opinion and not change it with every fad or new study that comes down the pike. I used to give the example of you wouldn't want to have to stop every morning and question whether it's wise to brush your teeth, right? Where are the data on teeth brushing? You would never get to breakfast. And then I read the study about flossing, maybe not being the critical important. Anyway, never mind. I digress. But of course, the point for all of us as skeptics is to know when we need to be able to let go of our opinions and practices, when the weight of the evidence dictates. Well, this is not easy. I was living in New York when the woman who came to be called the Central Park Jogger was brutally beaten and raped. 5 teenagers were convicted of the crime. Donald Trump spent $80,000 on newspaper ads calling for them to get the death penalty. Yet they were innocent. No physical evidence ever linked them with the crime. And 13 years later, a convicted rapist named Matthias Reyes admitted that he had been the perpetrator acting alone. The DA's office, headed by Robert Morgenthau, investigated for a year and could find no connection between Reyes and the teenagers. So the young men were released. Did the police and prosecutors say, "Thank you, Mr. Morgenthau, for finally making sure that justice was done"? No. Morgenthau's decision was denounced by the prosecutors and police officers who had been involved in the original investigation. The woman who'd been the lead prosecutor told a reporter she was certain the original convictions were correct. "Those of us on the prosecution team have always been looking for a 6th man," she said. I think the 5 were freed because it was politically expedient to do so. Last year, New York City, without admitting error, reached a settlement with the Central Park 5 for $41 million. Did Donald Trump take out ads apologizing for his impulsive mistake in assuming the boy's guilt? Maybe rethink the rush to the death penalty before you've actually been convicted? No. But when I said this phenomenon occurs on all sides of the political spectrum, there's been no apology either from the 80 Duke faculty members who paid for an ad assuming that their school's lacrosse players were guilty of having committed gang rape many years ago. When the DA in that case was disbarred for prosecutorial misconduct and the accuser admitted she lied, the faculty remained silent. None of us likes admitting we're wrong, especially when we have been riding off on the I'm mixing a metaphor here, on the high horse of self-righteousness. Oh, you get the point. This is the key, though. The prosecutors, Donald Trump, the Duke faculty, could cling to their mistakes not because they were sort of behaving in a mean and vicious way and unable to admit error. They clung to their belief that they were right because they see themselves as good, virtuous people who were doing the right thing. I'm a prosecutor. My job is to put bad people away, and you are telling me that I put innocent people away? Well, they're guilty of something else, if not that. Those lacrosse players were innocent? Oh, well, we all know about athletes at schools. These guys were rape cultured anyway. Dissonance reduction may be wired into our mental wiring, but how we think about our mistaken actions and beliefs is not. Understanding how dissonance works and that it is a part of how our brains are structured is no justification for letting it control us. Years ago, the then Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres was thrown into dissonance when his friend Ronald Reagan accepted an invitation to make a state visit to the cemetery at Bitburg, Germany, where 49 Nazi SS officers were buried. The announcement enraged Holocaust survivors and many others, but Reagan didn't back down from his decision to go to Bitburg. When reporters asked Peres what he thought of his friend's action, Peres neither condemned Reagan personally nor minimized the seriousness of his friend's visit to Bitburg. He took a third course. When a friend makes a mistake, he said, the friend remains a friend and the mistake remains a mistake. Which reminds me of a wonderful story about an old man on his birthday. He's turning 80 and his wife says to him, "Honey, how'd you like to come upstairs and make mad passionate love to me?" And he says, "I can't do both." Living with dissonance requires us to do both. Admit the mistake and separate it from our self-esteem. That is, in fact, what the skeptical movement is designed to help us do. Show that people can remain committed to their country, political party, friends, and family, and understand that it is not disloyal to disagree with actions or policies or candidates we find wrong or reprehensible. And when we are faced with evidence of our own mistaken beliefs, we can learn to say about ourselves, when I, a kind, smart, capable person, make a mistake or harm another person, I remain a kind, smart person, and what I did remains something I did that was wrong. Now, how do I remedy what I did and make sure I don't repeat it? Skeptics already have an immense challenge in debunking pseudoscience, con artists, and conspiracy theories. But to this burden, I would add one more. Facing our sources of dissonance, ambiguity, complexity, and compromise. For some on the left, compromise means selling out. For some on the right, compromise means consorting with the enemy. But no politician will do everything we want. No feminist or civil rights activist can achieve 100% ideological purity. No human being can be 100% free of bias. That means we will be living with dissonance always. But if we don't heed that message, we will suffer from the disorder that most plagues Americans. I got through almost all of them, but the last slide, which is of a doctor showing a brain scan to a woman saying, I'm sorry, your husband suffers from ODD, opinion dislodgement disorder. He will never change his mind again. Thank you.